Greetings and salutations, friends. Character NPC back at the gaming table. Today with Battle 5 of our playthrough of World War II, Battles in Europe, in historical order, using the Europa series of games. This, the invasion of Denmark, April 9th, 1940. It only took 6 hours for the Germans to march across the country, take the government in Copenhagen, and the Danes sided with the Germans from that point on. Not that they had forces that ended up being involved like Czechoslovakia. In this case, they really just weren't a problem for the Germans going forward. I've left this counter here because I wanted to point out for everyone where the capital is. However, that's the one piece that it isn't left. It would not be here if it wasn't for me just leaving it there. So in a moment, as I go through the battle, I'll remove that counter. But everything else here is where it would be, having completed the battle. Most of it really is about trying to make sure that this airfield up here at the top is captured. I have these Fallschirmjägers, these German parachute troops, ready to invade Norway on turn 1. I was able to make this happen, but note that here the capital is on an island, and it's a ferry across here. Although there is rail moving forward, this had to be captured by Navy to be able to use it by the Germans, versus the road and rail coming up from the border here. You can see the border with Denmark and Germany here. This is the end state, with the Fallschirmjägers ready to pair drop into Norway, and the rest of these forces aren't going to be able to make it on turn 1. So this is still ready to move as if it was the first turn. And these other troops that are at ports, there's some combat motorized forces in ports that will also be able to load up and move into Norway the following turn, the April 2 turn. But the first April 1 2-week turn, the majority of these troops will not be available. And that's really what this comes down to. Briefly, I wanted to point out that these counters here are representing where reinforcements would be had the Danes been able to survive through to the next turn. There would have been reinforcements popping up in these areas. So part of the exercise was to take all of these, take these, aircraft and scuttle these ships in the harbor. If it had not been for the Danish government capitulating, we had to come up with a couple of other units that weren't in the box. I'm not sure what happened here, whether it was just an updated order of battle or whether there was something missing out of the original box set, but there should have been some coastal defense batteries here. This one is actually from a winter war, as well as this. This is actually a coastal battery rather than it being, this would be representing, I believe, a static brigade there. So ignore that, but these numbers I wanted to point out would be locations where reinforcements would have come up the next turn. At the end of the day, much of this was about deciding in advance what was going to be needed to take the capital. And because this is such a naval transport heavy game, lots of the forces are going to be, all of the German forces are either going to be airdropped or moved in via naval transport. It was important to make the right decision of which divisions would be used in which battle, because there are only so many breakdown units. These divisions are the ones that can be broken down and therefore will be able to fit into transports which can't carry necessarily heavy weapons and combat motorized troops and things. It's really difficult to have all of your big heavy forces moving by sea. So it's really important to decide on which of the divisions are going to be used, as well as we really needed 5-to-1 odds to take Copenhagen. The odds at 4-to-1, there was a possibility of an attack stalled, and there are already so many minuses, and because it's a major city, it's all the forces except for artillery and engineers are half strength. So you need to kind of ensure that you're going to have the right combat odds to do this in one turn, as well as having these Fallschirmjäger arrive at this airstrip during the movement phase, such that they can then on turn 1 also paradrop into Norway. If these didn't arrive until the following turn, or if they didn't arrive, if we didn't take this until later, then they wouldn't be available during the first turn, and they're pretty necessary. So let me also mention that we are using Daniel T. Shaw's naval rules, and that allows us to have individual ship units. Each of these counters represents an individual unit rather than a group of ships. So in making this decision, since there are only so many of these breakdowns, it seemed best to choose, of the divisions, these 2 mountain divisions, 1 regular infantry division, and then these winterized infantry divisions that made the most sense to take to Norway. Since there were only so many breakdowns, that meant that this particular winterized division, which started here and was able to overrun a border guard unit, that was blocking the rail here. Since there wasn't a breakdown for it, it was reasonable to use it in the initial attack. There's also some combat motorized infantry. This small armored battalion. Some other combat motorized units I'll show here in a minute. There's another, there are also 2 infantry divisions here. One took some damage, flipped to cadre, and then this 7-6 division, which did not have a breakdown. And this artillery, which of course is heavy equipment, so it'll be difficult to get on ships and across to Norway. That can happen later. But again, starting out with a full division here, such that it could make this overrun, move up and take the rail up to this point, so that then rail could be used by the other units here, using the rest of their movement to move along, using these units were able to get all the way up to here, but not quite to the airfield, but then owning the rail again, using that rail to get up further, and then use its movement to capture the airfield and then start to move back again. I can't remember exactly which of these were used to advance and then move back, but we took all the way up to this port and did not really need to use an exploitation phase. In fact, we didn't even make this attack here because since you're able as the attacker to decide on the order of your attacks, I was able to take Copenhagen before having to make this attack. So since at this point the Danes are siding with the Germans from this point on, there was no reason to make this attack and risk anything, as well as these aircraft and these. This is a sub here. I think there's another ship. Yeah, a couple of submarines here. More coastal. They're not deep water subs. It was also necessary to use some aircraft. Again, thinking in advance, what was here required, gosh, I forgot exactly how much it was. I want to say we needed something like 27 attack factors to get a 5-to-1 ratio. And we had to take this side of the this waterway here from Rostock. We needed both sides to be able to use this and then use rail moving forward. So this was the only naval assault that we made, and using reduced Luftwaffe anti-aircraft. These were actually heavy anti-aircraft, but because they would contain heavy weapons, they were reduced before getting onto the ships and setting sail, then having to land and roll on the table for disbursement. I don't know, disbursement, seeing whether they were dispersed or not. We don't want to be dispersed. So 4 units landed here in the hopes that we would be assured of success. And aircraft-wise, sending in 1 fighter, I believe actually there were 2 fighters, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bombers. This other bomber here, this Ju-87R. So with those aircraft and having taken both sides here, we were able to move across, take the railway, move around since there was no zone of control here in Copenhagen, and from these 3 hexes attack the city. And I believe I rolled a 4. I'm not positive about that. I think I rolled a 4. So it was a half exchange, and that's why this particular division had to be reduced to a cadre. So Denmark is now siding with the Germans, and we did lose 1 HE-111P4 bomber unit. I forget exactly how many planes this represents, but there was a loss from anti-aircraft fire, and this was the unit that was overrun at the border. All of these forces, mine layer, and looks like a couple of small naval units, these were all scuttled in port. A couple of submarines. Another infantry regiment, supported infantry regiment. This was in the city. This was in the city, both of these. This was another coastal battery. And this aircraft was lost as well. I believe it was because I took the airport, this was also in Copenhagen as well. And there would have been some reinforcements coming in. So this was taken, representing, I guess, resource points or replacement points, maybe. So friends, a really interesting battle. It didn't take long, but it's a lot of thought and planning going into the process to make sure that everything was done in the right order, getting there in the right phase so that the paratroopers are ready to go and that these other forces are loaded onto ships and can be moved in on the April 1 turn, the first turn in Norway. There's a lot of naval forces. Again, we're using the Daniel T. Shaw naval rules, and just to give you an idea here, these are all the German naval units. It's 1 for 1. One counter represents one ship in most cases, and there's everything from submarines to different types of transports. Some of the transports are only for resources and some for fuel, and some for bringing combat supply, let's say, versus resource points for building airfields and other things. You can see quite a few ships. I'm not going to go into detail yet. We'll see it more when we get into Battle 6. Over here we have the Allied naval units, and it is a lot. The Norwegian forces, they've got mine layers and destroyers and cruisers and submarines. The British naval units is so vast. I'm not going to go into all the detail, but I'm going to keep backing up until you see all these units. I mean, they've got a ton of units, and really big ones. They've got, I believe it's 3 or 4 carriers, but I believe it's 3 or 4 carriers, but also these battleships here, true World War II battleships, the Warspite, the Valiant, the Resolution. These are all 38 attack strength. The Rodney and the Nelson with 52 attack strength. So these are those 16-inch guns with forward, aft, and in the middle. Got all kinds of different types of cruisers, destroyers, transports of all type. So they have a vast force, as well as some Polish naval units. I didn't know that the Polish had submarines, and here's some destroyers that were involved, but those forces are here too. A large amount of submarines. These are all French naval units. So we're finally seeing true Allied forces organized for battle versus individual one-on-one with the German or the Soviets, as it was in the Winter War. And so, friends, I won't go into any more detail at this point. It was very short, but I wanted to kind of lay out how things went. It worked out the way we had hoped, in that it would be something that could be done in one turn, as well as a portion of this taking place all in the movement phase, so that the forces would be available to move on to Norway in that first turn, rather than having to wait until the April 2 turn. That second turn, the Allied naval forces are already going to be around the fjords and inlets that are the ports that the Germans would need to begin their offensive in Norway. So it was crucial that certain objectives were completed, and it's just going to be really cool to see all of this play out. Next thing I have to do is I'm going to transfer what's here, exactly what's here, to the actual Storm Over Scandinavia map, which is underneath this. So you can see here the edge of this map we're using. We used this just to make it bigger and easy on us, but we'll transfer this over to the real map, and lay out the rest of the order of battle for Battle 6, and then start from there April 1. So it's kind of like playing 2 April 1 turns, except that only a part of these units will be available for the actual April 1 turn in Norway. I hope this makes sense. If it doesn't, well, this is it. I don't know that I can go back and recreate this again and portray it the way it was, but it was a lot of fun to kind of work through this. And also, I'll need to complete the breakdown of these divisions and then load them on the ships and place them where they'll be making their landings. Some of them will be ports, maybe they won't. Some might be beaches. There aren't a lot. There aren't very many clear hexes at all, and there's a lot of minuses for the disruption. Sorry, that's what I really meant to say, not dispersal. And the disruption role is both for the naval assault landings as well as airdrops. So how this breakdown is done and loading those breakdown units onto which naval transports or other ships, could be some kind of ocean liner, it could be a destroyer, might be able to carry a battalion. It's different parts of the rules. I might try to go through that a little bit in the next battle. But it isn't something I've had to deal with so far, so I don't know it by heart at this point. But that kind of summarizes what I'll need to do next. Come up with these breakdowns, place them on the ships, put those ships out on the map, noting that the Norwegian forces will be deployed first, and the Germans will have their April 1 surprise turn. They'll go first, but it won't be a dual surprise turn like in First to Fight, where you would have both a surprise and then a first turn. This will just be like the Germans going first, you might say. And because it is surprise, the forces that might have some kind of reaction in a way won't be manned and available. So like with Denmark, the fighter that they had was not manned and ready to go, so it didn't actually get to have a reaction. That's kind of the recourse to the surprise. Anyway, I'm digressing now. I guess I'll leave it here. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more.